Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to this private session that I'm going to be doing with Dr. Jill here in a minute. And hopefully, you've already had a chance to listen to the podcast episode, which will set you up well for understanding what we're doing here and kind of playing along with us. So, on the podcast episode, you mentioned about your difficulty saying no and chasing kind of shiny object syndrome and things. So, how does that show up in your life for you?
Basically, what I find happening is I'll be invited to participate in a project or something, and my immediate reaction is, oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. And not only that, I will grow and learn from doing it. And so I end up sort of agreeing to do it and then finding that the time commitment that it requires takes away from some of the other projects that are priorities in my life, or that I thought were priorities in my life.
Gotcha. So you say yes to things when, is it that you want to say yes to them, or do you feel like saying no when you say yes anyway?
Oh, I always want to say yes because it always sounds so exciting and so self-developmental and so full of the ability to give back and help others. So, I'm always excited and I always want to say yes. And then I say yes, and then I start having regrets when I look at my timetable.
And what exactly are the regrets? Like, what are the outcomes or the achievements that aren't happening because of the yeses?
Well, probably they're sort of more internal because I always feel that I'm not going to necessarily be able to do the almost perfect job that I wanted to do. I mean, most of the time things turn out just fine, but there's always this, I guess it's an anxiety creating thing. I'd never thought about having anxiety, but that's probably what's happening, that I worry more about not being able to be perfect.
At all the different things that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's taking on too much to possibly be able to do any of it perfectly.
Right.
Okay. Um, if I were able to like wave a magic wand and change this habit or behavior for you, how would you show up differently? Like, what would it be like for you when these opportunities present themselves?
I think I would be able to say to myself, it's time that you find a way that you can actually take time for yourself. I mean, my escapism is sitting down to read books. I don't watch a lot of television except cooking shows and things like that. But every time I have a bunch of projects on the way, and I sit down to just zonk out with my book for a while, I have this sort of guilty sensation of, really, you can't afford the time to do it. So it would free me in a way to be a little less perfectionistic and have to keep doing things. So
Let me ask, is there a feeling of like not being worthy of just relaxing or feeling like you have to be proving yourself through always doing something?
yeah, I don't really think about it not being worthy of it.
Okay.
Um, but that's a sort of an interesting idea because when I think about myself as a sort of young kid at school, um, things like when we had to learn we had words to learn for spelling and that kind of thing. It was always, have to do it, have to, because I have to get everything right. So probably that's a sort of holdover from wanting to be, the number one or the best at everything that I do.
Are there things that you say no to or don't do at all because of the need for it to be perfect? Or are some of these projects that aren't getting done things that you're maybe trying to hold yourself back on because you feel like they're not going to be
Mm.
perfect?
Um, I can't think of anything that I've said no to recently.
Okay.
which is part of the problem. Well, no, that's not true. There was the opportunity to go to a mastermind retreat in a place that I would have absolutely loved to go to. And I managed to hold myself back and say no, partly because of time, partly because of cost, and partly because I needed to finish a bunch of things that I was working on. So, yeah. Uh, and there've been a couple of events and things that I have not signed up for simply because of the time that would be involved. So, yeah, there are a
Gotcha.
few things that I've
But
said
it
no to.
almost sounds like the event, the mastermind that you said no to, is something that might have really been aligned as a yes if the other things weren't taking up the time that
Yeah,
you'd said yes to.
right.
Okay. All right. I've got some good background here. So, just trying to think of how we're kind of summing this up. I guess it's the ability to say no and to do you feel like you're clear on the things that do really matter to you, the things that you want to prioritize, or is there some lack of clarity there?
Um, well, I guess the first priority in my mind is completing really well the things that I have already committed to. So in that sense, that's my prioritization.
Okay. All right. So we're going to just use a scale, like a SUD scale, a subjective units of distress scale, to kind of assess how you feel about this. So from 0 to 10, where 10's like the worst and 0's the best, um, how much charge does the ability to say no to things kind of carry for you? Like, how
Mhm.
much distress does it cause you not being able to say no?
Um, okay, really, probably not a lot, maybe 3 or 4.
Okay.
So
Is it
low.
is something else more? Like, is it the regrets that come from it that have more of the charge, or like what's the part of it that really like bothers you that you wish you could change?
It's the regret of if I if I said yes and undertook it, um, the fact that I would be taking away, sorry, taking away from my me time.
So the regret is that you're not having the me time that you want to have to be able to just really take care of and
Right.
enjoy yourself
Yeah.
because you're overcommitted. Okay. All right. So we're going to start. This is going to be like follow the leader. So I'm going to tap and say something. You're just going to repeat it back and we'll
Mhm.
go through the round and then we'll kind of just reassess what feels like it shifts or changes. Now, we used the example on your show of a headache. That's a very tangible thing where it's like, you know that it's gone. This is a less tangible thing, but we can undoubtedly still make shifts that will then kind of present themselves as you think about saying yes or no to something in the future or as you're like prioritizing things. So it may not be immediate that you can be like, oh, I can tell something has changed, but you may also just have a sense of, feeling more calm about it or more clarity or in control of those things. So,
Okay, sounds great.
all right, I'm going to start on the side of the hand.
Does
Doesn't
it matter
matter
which hand?
doesn't matter which hand, you can switch, you can do one or the other. Or like we talked about on the show, you can also start for people that don't want to tap their hand. You can just kind of rub that sore spot. Whereas if you worked out and did your chest the day before, that spot that gets sore right there. And that is another way that you can set up for people that aren't able to, either use both hands or whatever. I know I like to tap sometimes when I'm driving, and I'll go to that because I can still have a hand on the wheel and I can still do it. And then I just karate chop my steering wheel. So, all right, here we go. Take a nice deep breath to begin with. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just getting present into this moment and focusing in on the regrets, the feelings that you have that come up when you take on too much. And then you can repeat after me. Even though I have a really hard time saying no,
Even though I have a really hard time saying no,
I want to love, accept, and forgive myself.
I want to love, accept, and forgive myself.
Even though I get overcommitted
Even though I get overcommitted
and it eats away at the time I have for myself.
and it eats away at the time I have for myself,
I honor these feelings and accept myself anyway.
I honor these feelings and accept myself anyway.
And even though I have a really hard time saying no,
And even though I have a really hard time saying no,
there's so many things I want to do and so many things that excite me.
there's so many things I want to do and so many things that excite me.
I still have a hard time doing it.
I still have a hard time doing it.
And I love and accept myself anyway.
And I love and accept myself anyway.
Now we're going to start going through some of the other points.
Okay.
This inability to say no.
This inability to say no.
I feel like I always have to say yes to all of the opportunities.
I feel like I always have to say yes to all of the opportunities.
And then I feel like I have to carry them out perfectly.
And then I feel like I have to carry them out perfectly.
And it can feel like a lot of pressure,
And it can feel like a lot of pressure,
even if it's self-imposed pressure.
even if it's self-imposed pressure.
And I end up having a lot of regrets because I don't have the time for myself that I want.
And I end up having a lot of regrets because I don't have the time for myself that I want.
I really value my me time and I'm taking it away from myself by saying yes.
I really value my me time and I'm taking it away from myself by saying yes.
But all of these opportunities sound so exciting.
Let's see what you're doing.
I'm under my arm, kind of like where your bra strap would wrap around your body, that under the arm area.
Okay.
All of
Sorry.
these opportunities sound so exciting.
All these opportunities sound so exciting.
How am I supposed to say no to them?
How am I supposed to say no to them?
But when I want to go sit on the couch and unwind, I regret saying yes.
But when I want to go and sit on the couch and unwind, I regret saying yes.
And I feel this internal pressure.
And I feel this internal pressure,
This need to complete all the things that I've committed to.
this need to complete all the things I've committed to.
And to do them all perfectly.
And to do them all perfectly.
Sometimes it makes me feel guilty.
Sometimes it makes me feel guilty.
Or I think about when I was young and I felt like I had to do things perfectly.
Or I think about when I was young and I had to do things perfectly.
There's a lot of internal programming around this.
There's a lot of internal programming around this.
What would it take for me to complete things without them being perfect?
What would it take for me to complete things without them being perfect?
To perhaps submit B quality work instead of A plus quality work.
To perhaps submit B quality work instead of A quality work.
Would my world fall apart?
Would my world fall apart?
Would I have more time for myself if I did that?
Would I have more time for myself if I did that?
Or what would it take for me to simply say no more often?
What would it take for me to simply say no more often?
Without that meaning that I didn't think it was a good opportunity.
Without that meaning that I didn't think it was a good opportunity.
Perhaps that sounds lovely, but I have other things to focus on right now.
Perhaps that sounds lovely, but I have other things to focus on now.
And I have typically had regrets when I've overcommitted myself.
And I've typically had regrets when I've overcommitted myself.
So right now, I'm just in a season of taking things slow.
So right now, I'm just in a season of taking things slow.
What would it take for that to feel aligned?
What would it take for that to feel aligned?
Clearing this internal programming down to a cellular level
Tearing this internal programming down to a cellular level.
and opening up to the idea that I am ultimately the one that creates this busy schedule.
And opening up to the idea that I am ultimately the one who creates this busy schedule.
And not all of these things I commit to actually align with the goals or feelings I want.
And not all of these things I commit to align with the goals and things I really want.
Not all of these things actually make me feel good.
Not all of these things actually make me feel good.
And I've worked too long and too hard to say yes to things that are not aligned.
And I've worked too long and too hard to say yes to things that are not perfectly aligned.
Or to feel the need to people please.
Or to feel the need to people please.
I'm at a time in my life when pleasing myself is among the most important things.
I'm at a time in my life when pleasing myself is one of the most important things.
And I don't do that very well when I'm overcommitted.
And I don't do that very well when I'm overcommitted.
So I'm just opening up to the idea that it's safe to say no.
So I'm just opening up to the idea that it's safe to say no.
And realizing how whole, complete, and powerful I am either way.
And realizing how whole, complete, and powerful I am either way.
Take a nice deep breath again through your nose and out through your mouth. And just tell me what came up for you as we were working through that exercise.
A sense of panic in some ways at the thought of not doing things perfectly is one of the things.
Okay. Sometimes things get worse before they get better.
Right, right. And then I guess a sense of sort of acceptance. Yes, I can say no, and I jolly well better start doing it.
Yeah. It's a great thing to pay attention to like what comes up for you when you're doing that. Like if I was working with you and you were my client and we were working on this like kind of people pleasing, can't say no over, committing yourself to things and taking off, kind of biting off more than you can chew, it would be fascinating because we'd be able to work on it in real time. We'd kind of leave the session and then you'd find yourself in the midst of a normal week where opportunities come and you have to kind of figure out whether they align or not. And that's like when I'm working with my clients, when they're like sending me a voice message and we're like figuring it out. I'm like, oh, hey, we'll tap on this, or like, have you thought about that, or that kind of thing. So I think like as you become conscious about this, and maybe this tapping round kind of peeled off a layer of the onion, so to speak, and there'll be a little bit more consciousness the next time that an opportunity comes up where you're like, does this align with the way that I want to take care of myself? Does this align with me, growing younger in my aging and really aligning with the things that feel good right now in my life, or is this just another task that's going to keep me from what I really want in my life? And if it is, then why am I doing that to myself? Why do I feel like it's not safe, or that I'm not worthy, or that it's just too unfamiliar for me to have that space and time that's just for me? And those are the things that I would be exploring.
Yeah, it's interesting because really one of the thoughts that came up was it's not really a question of people pleasing. It's the person who is my strongest judge that I need to please and satisfies myself. So I think
Yes.
there's a lot to dig into
So
with
it's
that.
more of an inner critic thing than an
Exactly.
outer critic thing, which is also a fascinating thing to look at and really kind of start listening for those voices in your head that need that reprogramming, that need to take on a different voice, or also to be listening for what that inner critic is trying to keep you safe from. Like, what does that inner critic think it's doing by getting you overcommitted all the time? Like, what's it afraid that's going to happen if you actually do have time and space to just enjoy this precious life?
Mm. Lots to think about.
Yeah. So thanks for tapping along with me. If you were to kind of like rate that same kind of feeling that you had in the beginning, where do you feel like you are on the scale? You were like a 3 or a 4 before.
Of stress.
Yeah, of like how much distress it causes you when you think about saying no.
Well, I would say lower now,
Okay,
much
good.
lower. I
Awesome.
don't know. Yeah, like maybe a 2.
Perfect. Hey, cut it in half. So that's that's just a few minutes work. So good work. And thank all of you for tapping along with us that have listened today. And I always love to hear, what people experience when they do this. So please feel free to shoot me an email with, what happened for you during this round, Theresa@theresalearlevine.com. Would you like to give your email, Dr. Jill, if you want to hear from people?
Sure, it's Gillian Lockitch, and the email is askdrgill@gmail.com. That's ASKDRGILL@gmail.com.
Awesome. I always such cool conversations can come from these sort of shared experiences when people are actually tapping along and doing this work. So, thank you all, and feel free to check out some of the other episodes on here and the different subject matter that's on there. Sometimes one thing leads to another, and you can make a whole lot of progress in a little bit of time. Thanks.